Good, how about you? Holy shit.
Should I write my name to go to the bathroom just in case I don't get back in time?
You can. You still need to be back on time.
Why, retarded?
Run.
Yes.
Christian, run. You have to run. Go, go. Death French.
You
It's
need
101.
to
You
go.
have
Don't be sitting around for 2
Well,
minutes.
I just got the.
Dude, you have 3 minutes now.
Another function. That's so real. That is a real image. That definitely gives off gangsta SpongeBob images from 2009 feels.
Okay.
Where's Luke? Where's everyone?
Yo, Luke, you think it's me?
Hey, buddy.
What the heck is that?
Oh, that was the last time.
You think if we showed Kanye 21 Jump Street reverse, would he revert? Mr. Townsend? That works? Never.
I think you'd have to find the key. Not the reverse. I always forget that's from time to time. It was just like that clip, and there's just like a bunch of nuts. It's just like, oh, you actually, I thought they made a joke.
I did get left behind once. Last year at All Region.
That was from last class. Did you get last time?
We stopped at Slim Chickens before the concert, and I was in the bathroom.
Diego, how'd you feel
waiting
about
for
A+?
that one to change.
Easy.
I had to pee.
Really?
That was a free
He
test.
took.
I thought it was kind of hard, honestly.
For real?
So
I mean,
I used the rest
multiple
of the
choice is easy, LAQ is easy.
No, the MCQ is honestly the hardest part.
Really?
No, it was like that one thing on like the Constitution and like the Federalist, anti-Federalist.
Yeah.
Like that one part
You were changing the bathroom.
was like
I was waiting
if
for
you
you.
didn't read it correctly, it would slip you
Did
up.
you get my?
But like the DDQ
I haven't had a chance to put them in yet, but
I'm taking to
was
that.
like a
yeah, I
given.
got them.
Really? I thought LAQ was the easiest.
The LAQ is really easy too.
Yeah, I should have just like gone in there.
You may not have gotten the same one, you realize?
That way I wouldn't-
Everybody got the
No,
same
everyone
one.
gets the same.
Diego's is way smarter.
Well, here's the thing, Mr. Pod just goes, alright, how many?
There's
high
usually
school
2
are
forms,
there?"
at
'Cause it was
least.
high school junior high.
There's
Everybody in
usually
my
2
class got the
forms.
same one.
Not
Oh.
for A push. It's the same one.
It's not.
Like everyone got like the evaluate to the extent how the definition of citizenship changed
20 years in the
like 1840 to like
What?
18 or 1930 something.
How do you make a t-shirt?
What?
Diego, what?
I'm talking to DDQ from
Purdue. Purdue or Purdue?
Rainbows.
Purdue.
Okay.
What about it? Huh? How do you spell it? A-R-D.
Well, we don't even know what.
What is it? What's the deal?
What's an AJ?
Just so you walk in over there.
Wait, did you see Cole's post?
What's he doing?
Did you see Cole's post, Cole Rogers, on Instagram? Can you please comment something mean? Please?
Are you like asking people to just go out and bully people?
We're all messing with him, and that'd be amazing if you did that.
Okay, I need to get y'all started here. So last class, you got several handouts which all come together to make up 115. And I think we made it through about question number 6 on Friday. But I need you to confirm that once you have that out. If you were not here on Friday, and you didn't come by and pick up the handouts, and you didn't print them out yourself, I left them on the front table up there for you.
Not have all the stuff on it. It's just get from like 2 to 5. Oh shoot, is that the only one with that? Oh, I messed up, my bad.
Alright, so while you guys figure that out, today we've got one full class period where we don't need to worry about anything except for rational functions. So on our front page here, we've got all of our notes that we took. So how to find x-intercepts, vertical asymptotes, and holes. We looked at that one the day before last class as well. Talked about y-intercepts. You plug in 0 for x and solve for y. The 3 rules you have to check for horizontal asymptotes, when you would have a slant asymptote, and how to find it, and how to go about describing domain. So we did all of that in good detail. And if my notes are correct, I didn't do this in the incorrect spot, I believe you did question 6 at the end of the last class. Is that correct?
No.
Number 6 is not the last one you have done?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So, since you should have this one finished already, I'm going to go through number 6, but fairly quickly, so this way you've got a little bit of a check to make sure that you agree with what I'm doing. Give us a good chance to, or give you a good chance to go ahead and speak up on any of these that are not immediately coming to you. And then we will practice some more of these together, and then I'll leave the last couple of them for you to do. Okay, so again, so I'm going to go over this one for you to check, but you should already have it done. Then I'm going to go over number 7 as one more reteach, just to kind of jog your memory. And then, but then once you get to question 8, again, I think you should start off with the parts that you feel most comfortable with. So I would say for a lot of people, y-intercept is going to be one of the easiest things. Plug in 0 for x and solve. And it looks like it would be 1/4. So that's going to be a point for our table and for our chart. For these 3, these are the ones that we started practicing 2 classes ago. These require you to know what numbers make the numerator 0 and the denominator 0. So sometimes that means you've got to do some factoring. Sometimes you don't. For this question, you didn't need to factor the numerator, but you probably wanted to factor the denominator. If you have a number that makes both the numerator and the denominator 0, it's a whole. If you've got a number that makes just the numerator 0, it's an x-intercept, which is going to give us another point for our table and our chart. And if you have a number that makes just a denominator 0, that's a vertical asymptote. Now, I think as we go through these, you can see that you do have to know a lot of stuff. You have to know what all of these things are, what they look like, and how to find them. So there's a little bit of a hurdle there. But once you kind of know what you're looking for, you can see that I answered 4 of these questions with really about 2 steps of work. Very little work needed, but you have to know what you're doing. Okay, domain's a little bit easier to see once the graph is done, so I tend to do that at the end. Horizontal asymptotes is the one you need to compare the degrees of the numerator to the degree of the denominator. If the degree of the numerator is bigger, there's no horizontal asymptote. If the degree of the denominator is bigger, it's 0. And if the degrees are equal, it is y equals leading coefficient over leading coefficient. So in this question, negative 1/4. And then slant asymptote is the one that's going to take the longest. You have to do long division, and your equation will be y equals whatever the quotient is, ignore the remainder, but only if the degree of the numerator is 1 bigger than the degree of the denominator. Since that's not the case here, that should be about a 2-second question. Now, when we put these points, or when you put these points, because you should have already done this, when you put these points on your graph, and you graph the asymptotes as some dashed lines. Asymptotes always go in as dashed lines. We saw a couple different things happen. One is you may not be confident and you may just not have enough points yet. You're always encouraged to plug in more points. Don't plug in x equals 10. That's going to be hard to compute without a calculator. But you could plug in 1 pretty easily. You could plug in -2, -1 fairly easily. But sometimes, like this question, we don't even need it if we remember how the graph behaves around the asymptotes. So horizontal and slant asymptotes, the only thing they tell you is what the graph approaches at the ends of the graph. So it gets close to it on the far right and the far left. Based on this guy's direction, vertical asymptotes, it always goes to infinity on one side and negative infinity on the other side. And again, it's got to approach the horizontal asymptote on the left. So I don't know that we needed any more points for that one, but that's why your graph should have looked like that for number 6. So since you already did that one, I am ready to move on unless y'all immediately have any questions. Yes?
Can you help with slant asymptote on number 8?
No, we're not on number 8 yet.
Oh,
Just skip that part if that's where you're at.
my bad. Thank you.
Any questions about 6? Yes? Oh yeah, domain, sorry. So domain, we need to describe all the x values that the graph does hit. So I can see it hits all of these from the far left until you get to -4. So negative infinity to -4. And then it hits all of these, which is -4 forever to the right. So that would be your domain. Long way to say you can't plug in -4. Other questions? Okay, so I'm basically going to be saying the same things again. The definition of these things and the approach to each of these things isn't changing. You just need enough repetition that these sink in. So this would be the only one that I do for you today, because I did several for you last class. But on 7, all you have to do is follow along. So if I just did these in the order that I would do them, I would probably plug in 0 for x to find my y-intercept. And if I do that, what is my y-intercept going to be?
-2/3.
Or -4, 6, but that reduces. So we saw from the last question, we don't need a ton of points to know what our graph looks like. So any points we can get is welcome. Okay, for these 3, I need to know what numbers make the numerator 0 and the denominator. The numerator is already factored, so it's ready to go, but the denominator probably needs to be factored. Numbers that make both the numerator and denominator 0 give you a whole. Numbers that make just the numerator 0 give you x-intercepts, so there's another point. And numbers that make just the denominator 0 give you vertical asymptotes. Vertical asymptotes are vertical lines, so this x equals is important. It is required. Okay, horizontal asymptotes, you got to compare the degrees. The degree of the bottom is bigger, it's 0. The degree of the numerator is bigger, it doesn't exist. And if the degrees are equal, it will be y equals leading coefficient over leading coefficient. So -1/2. Try to highlight that to help you see where that's coming from. And then this one doesn't have a slant asymptote. How do I know it doesn't have a slant asymptote?
Because it has a horizontal asymptote.
That's true. If it has a horizontal asymptote, it can't have a slant asymptote. But it could have neither. So when is it going to have a slant asymptote? Perfect. Degree of the numerator has to be 1 bigger than the degree of the denominator. So after you find those things, plot your points that you've got, x and y intercepts, plot your vertical asymptotes as dashed lines, graph your horizontal asymptotes as dashed lines, graph your slant asymptotes as dashed lines, all asymptotes dashed lines. And now again, more points is always better. Do I have enough points on this one though?
Yes.
Okay, how come? If I know it hits this point, what's going to happen to the right?
It's gonna keep going closer and closer
Closer to what?
to the asymptote.
Right. Horizontal asymptote, it has to approach on the far right and the far left. And then based on, we can see this direction, it tells me it's going up. And based on this direction, it tells me it's going down. And again, those asymptotes, if you know how it interacts around those, you can often save yourself from plotting a ton of points like your calculator has to do. Okay, and then we hit all of these x values from -infinity to -3. And then we hit all of these x values from -3 to infinity. Okay, any specific part of number 7 jumping out at you as being more difficult that you want to ask a specific question on? Want me to say the directions again? Anything like that? Okay, then I would like you to try question 8. And unfortunately, we still don't have our classroom calculators. They use those for AP testing. So while you work this question, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to graph it on the board for us to see. Because this is what I would normally make all of my students do. And we will use it as a way to check the majority of our work. But we'll talk about how to do that in a minute. So as you finish question 8, that does not look right. Okay, as you finish question 8, see if your graph looks the same as the calculator's graph, and if it doesn't, it should maybe be giving you some hints on what to try again. What I mean by that is the graph looks like it has 2 x-intercepts, so if you think it only had 1 x-intercept, then something about that work needs to be revisited. But I will give you about 6 minutes to do your best on question 8. So put in a good effort. It's not a rush. Okay. Let's look at question 8. So again, if your graph looks similar to my graph, that's going to check most of the stuff for you. It doesn't check everything though. You could still have messed up the domain. There is a slant asymptote right here, and your equation could be a little bit off, but where it still looks kind of close. And I think this one has a hole in it, I think. Which again, your calculator does not do a good job of showing that to you. Now, it knows that there's a hole there, but until you do the work, it's hard to know that. So this checks most of it, so I'd say if that looks good and you feel confident about your answer for hole and domain and slant asymptote, then I guess you can go ahead and move on to question 9. But if you are not sure, then let's look at this together. So let me start with some of the ones I think are easier, and I'll go pretty quickly on those. Plug in 0 for x and solve for y is how you find y-intercept. You end up with 0 divided by -9. This guy needs to be factored. Oops. And the numerator had a GCF and a difference of 2 squares. Things can factor more than once. The denominator also has a GCF and then a trinomial. And I made a real careless mistake on this morning in 0 hour, and then I basically had to redo the whole question. So try to learn from my mistake here. Don't go so fast on the factoring that you make careless mistakes and have to start over. But it looks like the numerator equals 0 at 0, -3, and 3. And the denominator equals 0 at 3 and -1. Notice this 3 doesn't affect that. The x does. X equals 0 at 0. 3 doesn't ever equal 0. That's why it doesn't give me one. So you have to consider those things, but sometimes they give you something, sometimes they don't. So all of that to see that -1 makes just a denominator 0. So I think there should be one vertical spike in this graph. 0 and 3 make only the numerator 0. Why should I have known this one? Right, the origin is not just an x-intercept, it's also a y-intercept. So it's good to see that that's consistent. But it looks like positive, oh wait, did I say +3? This should be -3, right? Okay, it looks like +3 makes the numerator and denominator 0, so that's the x value of the whole. Again, even if we let you have a calculator, you would not get this question correct because you are not going to see it. Bless you. Have to work this by hand. It's the only way to get this. Now, I'm going to highlight this, and I've been warning y'all, this tends to be one of the few things on our next test that students struggle with. And the problem is just that you don't get to practice at every question. You have to do 3 or 4 questions before one of them has a hole. You don't plug it into the function, you're going to get 0 over 0. You don't plug it into the factored form, you get 0 over 0. You have to plug it into the reduced fraction form. You need this stuff to cancel so that you don't end up with 0 over 0. So after you cancel these, you are left with 3 times 6 over 3 times 4, which reduces to divide by 6, divide by 6, 3 over 2. Okay with that? Now, again, we have no intentions of giving you a calculator because there's too much that the calculator would just do for you. But I know you guys also are interested in like ACT type stuff. So let me show you real quick on the calculator. If I do trace 3 enter, it realizes that there's no y value that exists for x equals 3. That's a good sign. If you move your cursor a little bit to the left of 3, you can see y is close to about what? Okay, and if you move it to the right of 3 just a little bit, it's around, and we just said that it is 3/2, 1.5. So that makes sense. Those decimals are near where I expect it to be. Now again, just because your graph is right doesn't mean this is right. That's one of the things that you can't check by just skimming it. Okay, horizontal asymptotes. It doesn't have one because the degree of the numerator is bigger. Because the degree is 1 bigger than the degree of the denominator, it takes 2 seconds to know there's a slant asymptote. But to find the equation of the slant asymptote, unfortunately, this is where we have to do some long division. So I'll go through this part pretty quickly, but then I'll give you all a chance to ask questions here. So multiply these. Change the signs and add. Got these x squareds. These are x's, so they can combine. Do the same thing again, and then what can I multiply by 3x squared to get 2x squared? Get 2/3. Multiplying by 1/3 divides by 3, which would make it a 1. So if you want it to be a 2, you need to multiply it by 2. So that gives me this. This would be negative 4x and negative 6, I believe. I don't know, but I also don't care. I could see that I was close enough to the remainder that if I did have a careless mistake, it doesn't matter because that does not affect the slant asymptote. Our slant asymptote equation was 1/3 x plus 2/3. I think I may have mentioned this on Friday, but usually these don't deal with fractions, but it's good for you to practice with fractions anyway. All right, like all of our graphs, we know some points. So we can throw those on a graph. The whole is not really a point on the graph, but you are expected to show it as an open circle. Just because your calculator does a bad job doesn't mean that we need to do a bad job with it. We've got some asymptotes like x equals 1, but also y equals 1/3 x plus 2/3. So this is in mx plus b format. We've got a y-intercept. We've got a slope. It's an asymptote, so dashed line. And I think we are ready to graph it now. So even though it doesn't hit this point, it's going to hit the points right before it and right after it. It's got to hit this point. So based on this guy's direction, this is why it's going down on this side and up on this side, which is good because that's how it's going to hit this point. Usually if you have 1 or 2 things wrong, usually your graph feels really difficult to construct because you get some conflicting information. Everything needs to fit together nicely if all of your stuff is right. And then just like horizontal asymptotes, slant asymptotes will tell you what the graph approaches on the far left and the far right. So this matched up to this. In fact, I'll even change the window settings to match up with our grid, and then it should look even closer. And it's not going to be 100% accurate because your calculator is plotting hundreds of points, but it should be pretty close considering we only spent a couple minutes on it. Okay, and then last part. Would be domain. And I will say for domain, I think even if you're feeling pretty confident here, this is an easy one to miss. You hit all of these x values, -infinity to -1, and then what's the next interval? -1 to what? Not to infinity. And that's what I'm concerned
Oh,
about.
-1 to.
Right. X equals 3 can't exist. So we have to do this as his own interval, -1 to 3, and then 3 to infinity. Domain doesn't care why you can't plug those numbers in, just that you can't. -1 is a vertical asymptote, x equals 3 is a whole, but neither one of them exists in the domain, so they both have to be taken out. And that's easy to skip. Again, because not every question has a whole, it doesn't make you think about this in every question. So, okay, so more important than the practice, more important than listening to me going over it, if you guys need to ask some questions, then this would be your chance. They're only going to get easier if you understand what you should be doing. Okay, and I'm not going to beat you over the head about it today, but I really think as we go over questions and you realize that you made a mistake or you misread something or you misunderstood something, go back to this box on the first page, erase what I had you write down, reword it, make it more detailed, put this example out to the side, do whatever you need to do so that everything you have to know from this section, it's actually 2 sections. This is actually 2.6 and 2.7, but all of it would be in one spot. So you have one quick place to review as needed. Okay, anything y'all want to ask about number 8? Okay, then starting with question 9, what I'm going to do is I will graph it up here for you. Give you 5 to 7 minutes. Like questions where you have to do the long division, I know you're going to need longer. Questions where you don't, shouldn't need as long. But in number 9, this is what your graph is supposed to look like. So again, try to learn, don't use this as a way to get the answers, but like after you get your x-intercepts answers, if you don't have 2 answers there, then you need to retry your work. If you don't get a y-intercept at 0, then you need to reconsider your work. But I'll give you enough time to try that, and then I'll give you a chance to speak up, and I will work any and all parts of 9 if we need to. But at this point, you should kind of know what your weaknesses are, and you should start to be able to kind of move on at your own pace, I hope. Plus, what we don't get to in class today, I will need you to do for homework between now and Wednesday, so please stay on top of it the best you can.
Do you have a class for first period on A-days?
First, I do, yes.
Do you think that I could come take the quiz during that? Because it's my study hall period.
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay, on Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey,
And
how was it?
it was actually it was pretty decent. Decent.
Easy 5, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, light work. See you on Thursday.
Okay. Wait, you're not gonna be here tomorrow?
No, I got Aflac.
Oh, okay. Good luck. Calculus students had their AP test today.
That's so fun.
One more page.
Yeah, but you need to check your work.
Yeah, you read. Oh, and, you know how you told me that I didn't do one of the questions on the homework?
Okay.
And I showed it to you?
No, I don't remember. Just show it to me later.
Okay.
No, it's not a good time. Okay, was this question 9, I think? Okay, so what parts of question 9 would you like me to go over with you to help you get that graph?
Yeah.
I will assist y'all in doing it. What'd you get for the y-intercept?
0, 0.
Okay, I agree. Plug in 0 for x, solve for y. I have to factor this real quick to have an idea of what's going on. Okay, does your factoring look like that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so what do you think your x-intercepts are then?
0, 0, 4, 0.
Okay, I agree. The two numbers that make just a numerator 0. What about vertical asymptotes?
3 and -1.
Okay, x equals on both of those, I'm assuming. Those are the number that make only the denominator 0. No number makes the numerator and denominator 0. Okay, what'd you get for horizontal asymptote? Okay, degrees are the same, so leading coefficient over leading coefficient, 3/1. It doesn't have a slant asymptote because the degree of the numerator is not 1 bigger than the degree of the denominator. Domain is going to have you take out anything that's division by 0, whether that's a whole or a vertical asymptote. Always put the smaller number on the left. Is that what you got for domain? You need to skip -1, so this means take numbers less than -1. This means take numbers bigger than -1. That's the same thing as saying skip it.
Yeah, I got everything there, just except for that.
Okay. Then it might be an easy fix. So plot your y-intercept, plot your 2x intercepts, and you have these two spots. Luke, you want to put your chair down? You're making me nervous. I know someone that busted their head open doing that. So, okay, vertical asymptotes as dashed lines. You should have a vertical spike in your graph at x equals -1 and x equals 3. And an asymptote at y equals 3. You've got all that on your graph?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then we'll go back and add more points if we need to. But one thing that you should be sure of, because there's a horizontal or a slant asymptote, you should know that your graph is going to try to approach it on the right. Based on this direction, this must be going down to -infinity, which means this side's going to positive infinity. Now, here's where I think plugging in some more points might be beneficial to y'all. If you're not sure how you're supposed to hit this point and be coming up here, you could plug in x equals 1 to find the y value, plug in x equals 2 to find the y value. But I think sometimes what throws y'all off on this is that you think that you can't cross this. And that's not true. You can cross a horizontal asymptote, you can cross a slant asymptote. All of those things tell you is what you approach on the far right and far left of the graph. But if your graph has a middle section like this, it can cross it, and then this goes to -infinity, this goes to positive infinity, and that's why the graph looks like that. You can cross a horizontal asymptote and you can cross a slant asymptote, but only if your graph has at least 3 sections, and sometimes it crosses in the middle, sometimes it doesn't. That's where you might need to find more points. Why?
I just don't get it. Like, yes, they're supposed to not like.
Well, the only reason the graph can't cross the vertical asymptotes is because a function, you only get one shot at each x value. So if x can't be 3, there's no other time that x can be 3.
Oh yes.
For horizontal and slant asymptotes, they really just help you with the end behavior. They tell me what's happening at the ends of the graph, but in the middle of the graph, it's still fair game. So
Yeah. So it's just like.
it can still cross that if there's at least 3 sections.
Right.
But again, if that bugs you and if that feels like you're not doing something right, you can take a second, get an extra point, plug in x equals 1 maybe.
9/4.
And 9/4 is about 2 1/4. So right about here. And if you make yourself plot some more of these points here, you can you'll feel better about why it goes that direction. That's why I say more points is always better. All right. If you've not moved on to question 10, what you got?
And so you said if you cross the horizontal asymptote, the same asymptote, so long as it's in the middle section, or just in general?
It has to be in the middle section.
Okay.
Like, this doesn't match up with this graph. But let's say that there was only one vertical asymptote, and the graph looks like this. If there was a horizontal here, since it can only approach on the far right and only approach on the far left, if there's not like a middle section, then it shouldn't be crossing it. But if there's something like this, then it could be going through it in the middle and still be consistent with everything else.
So there is a point where it crosses. Like there's a point there.
I'm just making up a thing. I don't know. In question 9, yes.
But yeah, question 9. There is a point where it crosses the horizontal asymptote.
Yes.
Okay.
Somewhere around 1, 2, 3, somewhere in here.
Okay.
Okay, so same thing. I'm going to have our calculator graph number 10, and then let that guide some of your work. But on that question 9 that y'all asked, that you said your graph just looked a lot different, was it just that?
I just didn't graph it right yet. I didn't have it cross the horizontal asymptote.
Didn't it make it feel like the rest of your graphs? Didn't it feel like something was wrong though?
It did, but I didn't
Yeah.
really know why.
Okay, this is what we're aiming for on question 10. So let me give you a few minutes to give it a shot. And then we can talk about any parts we need to. All of it if we need to also. But as you get stuck, try to use your notes on the front page. And if you're really stuck before I'm ready to move on, then to start the next question and do the parts you're more comfortable with.
What are you talking about? Our senior year, the percussion group's gonna be solid. How?
You're not gonna be a senior, you're gonna get held back.
My words are actually.
Rain's gonna be forgotten at a band competition.
Yeah, he's gonna have to grow up and be a senior.
We're all gonna be seniors, me, Caleb, and Josiah. Who doesn't have marching experience? The baseline of the system is also.
Baseline's the checking system, I swear to God.
Oh. Like last year, the
philosophy.
baseline was better than this.
I've plugged in a bunch of points for each one. definitely last year's baseline was way better.
Yeah, the last year's baseline though, Cole Jackson.
You've got 2 problems left with your time.
Sorry, I was literally just doing work like I'm here.
Guess what this tells of 2 problems.
Isn't that what you just said 10 minutes ago?
Huh?
Didn't you say the same thing 10 minutes ago?
I said 1 more page, so that's 4 bucks. Whoa.
Oh, Friday? Friday is it? Friday is
Yeah.
Oh, and then I'll be like, honestly,
Do the easy ones first, and then second part later.
then I was like, I want to say that. You weren't there for Friday. You wanted me to have 3 bowls.
Okay, that's been 5 minutes for this one. I think this is number 10. Any parts of number 10 that's not matching up with the graph you want me to go over?
Can you go over the slant asymptote?
Okay. So why is there a slant asymptote number 10?
Because the degree on top is one more than the degree on the bottom.
Good. Now, one thing that's optional here is since there's no x squareds, you could say plus 0x squareds if that makes it easier for you. It's not necessary, but... Okay, so you set it up like this. Yes? Okay, what is the first part of your quotient going to be then?
Negative 1/4 x.
Okay, that's good because that gives you this. Then negative 1/4 x times 4x would be negative 1x squared. Since these are x's and these are x squareds, I just choose not to line them up. And then negative 1/4 x times 24 would be negative 6x. Okay, and then if you change the signs and combine like terms, you have an x squared and a minus 10x. Are we still the same there?
I was just getting confused.
Okay, well these are like terms, so I combined them together, and then this didn't have anything else to combine with, so it just carried down. These added to 0. Now, you may not have lined them up the same way as me, but it's still going to work out the same way. You're taking all of this stuff plus all of this stuff after you change the signs. Just combining like terms. So, the next part would need to be negative 4. Oh, negative 1/4 to get you an x squared. Okay, but all that becomes a remainder anyway. So I would say for the slant asymptote, it would need to be y equals, that's correct. Now, again, I know you don't always have a calculator. You can't count on a calculator on the quiz or the test. But one nice thing that you guys need to consider is if you already have this graphed in your calculator for some other reason, graph the slant asymptote as well. Is this what we got for slant asymptote?
Yes.
Okay, and what you should see is that it fits in this slant perfectly. And it's a little hard to see when you're just going negative 5 to 5, negative 5 to 5. But if you change it from negative 10 to 10, negative 10 to 10, which is more than we're graphing, you're going to see that this slant asymptote is just like, just slides into this little slant perfectly. And So when you have a calculator like the ACT, that's a good way to quickly check your slant asymptote work. You see what I'm talking about with this red line? And then like a couple questions ago, you can cross a slant asymptote or a horizontal asymptote, just like right here, as long as it's not at the far left or far right of the graph. It needs to be in the middle. Okay, has anybody got another part of this one they'd like to see worked out? Okay, then I will share my graph to number 11. So you need to end up with the same thing as me for number 11, and I will leave that up on the board here for a bit.
It's 17 over 60. So it'd be like around here. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. Did you? Oh. Like what? Bro, I swear to God. Band is the one place like the band is just like I never know who's dating and who's going on dating.
Yeah. There's always so much stuff like another slant.
Look.
There's always so much stuff with that, it's hard to keep up with it.
Yeah. I like it. I guess. Look.
I've been known. She's been known for a while.
What is with you and that yet?
Bro, that song slaps. I love Adam. That was good. Swear to God. Ugh, swear. This was the bane of my existence in algebra 2. Like slant asymptotes.
I don't even remember it, honestly. Which is probably why it's been such a thing. I like Tupac story. Everybody's like the conversation. You said avalanche random, right?
Yeah, it's not random.
Oh. Well, what are you all trying to play? Monka.
Oh, I love Monka. What?
I have never heard anybody say
C-A-L-L or C-A-L-A. Man, Hal. There's no A before the C.
I got the domain.
It's not mana. It's man.
That makes way more sense. I just never heard him spoken.
bruh.
You gotta give me some slack. The first time I read that word was first grade.
Oh. I like playing it in real life. I like it.
I had him in the club.
Love Penguin. Jesus Christ.
So it is.
There's so many grinders on Glove Penguin, I swear.
Are you done yet? I know, but it took forever.
Man. At least you're not like Olivia. She spelled trash. But like you have to give her some slack. She's also learning Spanish.
I'm not giving no slack to anybody for that.
But Olivia was like we all learned Spanish as a kid alongside English. That's the thing.
At the same time?
Yeah.
Why?
Because.
I mean, I think it's good to know, but like at the same time, I feel like they're just
Well,
causing.
yeah, or else we'll have a disadvantage in either one.
Wouldn't that give you a disadvantage in those?
No.
Because you like wouldn't know them as like you wouldn't know.
Well, you
either
know
one.
both of those equally.
Yeah, it's equally, but wouldn't
And
it
then
be at a
if you
lower
learn
level
if
than
you learn
everyone?
English, and if you speak English more guided, then you have less Spanish. Whenever you speak words on Spanish, either or, you know.
Are you in Spanish?
Yeah, I am.
Are you fluent in Spanish?
Yeah,
Are you?
I can translate stuff.
So Spanish really easy?
Yeah. I just the thing is that like I'm not the best at speaking in Spanish, and just I don't know exactly how to spell some words. I just kind of go based off of like the how
What
how
you think it should be?
Huh?
Like what you think it should be?
Yeah, well, based on like the verbal pronunciation, that's the thing. And yeah, it's just also just grammar rules. Like when someone speaks to me in Spanish, I understand. I can say like what they're saying. It's just holes. Be that guy.
Okay, I'm assuming that one's okay.
Yep.
Give me a sec.
Okay, I'm switching the graph from number 11 to number 12. So if you don't have your own calculator to check your work today, make sure you're ending up with a graph that looks like that.
What did you get for the slide?
Give me a sec. See, it's just 1/4 x.
1/4 x.
Yeah.
No, minus one.
No, look what I did.
I got negative 1/4 x forever. Oh wait, yeah, I got negative 1/4 x minus 1.
Oh yeah, negative 1/4. No, it cancels out. Negative 1/4 x.
Yeah, because that cancels with that.
Isn't it? Negative 1/4 x.
Well, this would be minus 2x.
Yeah, you would get minus 2x and then you got to split.
No, that would cancel.
Do you like motivational quotes?
You're switching the signs. One of the wrong places.
Wait, hold on.
There was one that today.
Or, I don't
It
know,
was
I don't do it that way.
It was success is just a collection of problems solved.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Cause like,
yeah.
like,
'Cause I-
could you please comment on Cole's post on Instagram?
Dude, we're not
Maybe say like bad caption or like city boy. I don't know.
Let me see.
He hates that.
I got to 12 at one
I don't really care.
I don't know. When you're finished, I'll help you think of something. But
Move Kroger. Well, I mean, you're technically acknowledging them. Right?
Wait, I only have 2 more
Would that
minutes.
go against what you're saying?
I don't know what we're saying.
Like if you say I don't give a crap, then but like if you say that to someone, that means you're acknowledging them and like that they're speaking.
You can acknowledge
So would
what
you
silence.
technically give a crap?
Well, it depends on what you're saying. Are you saying you don't give a crap about them, or you don't care about give a crap about what they're saying? You can acknowledge what they've said, but not care about it.
I guess, but like.
Not care about the content of it. Now, if you're saying I don't care that you said that, then that would.
That was a sticky situation.
Hold on.
Oh, I did. I just saw it.
Give me a sec. I have a
You're
video
just suffering
for
from
it.
success. How do you go to bed at night? You're so funny. Like, how would you not just stay awake laughing?
How do you go to Reddit? Reddit night?
So I got up to 5, went back to sleep for 10 minutes. and that was it.
I fucking hate that. Like, sorry, that was so random. But about sleep, it only started like this week. It will meow at like 6 every morning, like without fail at 6 o'clock. It just starts meowing for no reason. There's nothing I can do for it to stop. It just like has to stop on its own. And I'll open my door. Sometimes it'll be at my door, and it never likes me either. I open my door and it'll run into my room and jump up on my bed, sit there for like 5 seconds, and then run back out and just.
What is
start
this?
doing it
What
again.
is it?
My cat.
Oh.
Stop! Like.
Bro, a pet iguana would be sick. I would be able to have it on my shoulder, like kind of wrapped around a little bit. Like, wouldn't that be
Thinking of
cool?
a snake.
No, like an iguana. I look like a pirate.
I feel like he said you were.
And like the snakes are more fidgety, you know?
He, I only remember his name.
Go, yeah, it was-
And then
It was, Raiden Lesnar.
That's like the average UK drill track.
Ice Spice using a UK drill rap while talking a little bit faster than usual over it. About like hurting a baddie. Bro, she looks like Annie. And she was never adopted by Warbucks.
You videos like her.
She was in like a brothel.
my god. That's horrible.
Ice Spice and Annie in a brothel.
Am
Am I wrong?
If you factor 13.
Like all the meat
Demon food.
It's always like a
Wait, what?
Everybody.
How'd you get?
Close out of it and then go back.
Think about.
Sometimes it's
I
like
just said a vanilla will let me play.
yeah, it's a glitch. That sometimes happens when playing Minecraft. It's like nothing happens. I like the cactus ones.
You know how much the coronation costs? A lot. 250 million pounds.
Wait, what are you talking about?
The coronation.
Oh.
For the,
They use like an Air Force and stuff. Oh yeah, Luke, you ready?
dude's not gonna like
You
live
ready
to
for
like
Counterpoint? You ready for Counter-Strike? Next show?
I'm ready for counterblocks.
Bro, Counter-Strike will be such a good show.
Wasn't it counterpoint?
Yeah, I know, I'm making it.
He's like,
I thought you were done.
Well, it's just he's like counterblocks. Counter-strike. Like, that doesn't sound right.
what are you, 80? What's wrong with you?
No, I am.
What did you get again for the
I
Xbox?
am 16.
For 11.
Shut the hell up.